So my name is Nicholas Bandeluk. I study at Ghent University. I'm graduating this year if all goes well. I study business engineering and my major is in operations management. So next year I'm looking to apply to a US university. In the first place, I wanted to apply to Stanford, but then they advised me to apply to several schools. So I looked up some more programs and I found some interesting programs in MIT as well. Well, I always knew I wanted to study abroad, and I've been a few times in the US, and the universities and the culture seemed really interesting. So I decided to apply for these schools, but since my university gives little information on what to do, what requirements you need, I decided to talk to some people, went to the library, and I all found that they all said to me, you have to do the GMAT test, it's a really important test. So I went to Amazon.com, bought the books, and started studying. 2 weeks later I took the test, and then I wondered, what programs do I want to do now? So I started looking up these programs, saw the requirements, and they all required GRE. So there I stood with my GMAT score. So 2 months ago I took the GRE test, and so I've done both GMAT and GRE. Same for IELTS and TOEFL. You needed an English proficiency test, and I did the IELTS test, but the programs I wanted to apply to required the TOEFL test, so I also took the TOEFL test. For me, the major difference between the two tests was the verbal section. For GRE, I had much more difficulties with, because I'm a non-native speaker, they asked for words like placid, skittish, aloof. I had no idea what they meant. In GMAT, with my English background, it was much more easy. The test was much more business focused, so also the text and everything was much more focused on business, so that was easier, given my background also, to understand most sentences. So the major difference was in the verbal part. The quantitative section of the GRE was, according to me, also a bit easier than the GMAT. So that was, according to me, these are the main differences between GMAT and GRE. In Belgium, generally, you have a very good background in math, and so I studied about a week for the GMAT test. I went through the quantitative section to refresh all the little rules you have to know. So that went quite well. For the GRE, it was about the same, but as I said before, with the background we have in Belgium, you should be safe for the quantitative section. The verbal section was something else. I studied the examples they gave, and I tried to understand how they asked the questions. But still, for a non-native speaker, it was quite difficult. And also, I didn't really find a good way to prepare for the verbal section. So maybe it will be useful if you are looking to do the GMAT or the GRE test, to find someone who can explain you more about the verbal section, because I think that's essential for a non-native speaker to make a difference. The main difference is that the TOEFL, everything you need to talk to a computer. Everything is done by the computer, so you need to talk to the computer, you need to fill in everything in the computer. While IELTS is more paper-based, so you need to fill in words, stick it in by pen. Also for the speaking section, and IELTS you have to speak to a person, so that gives a bit more interaction, while in the TOEFL test you need to speak to a computer, so you just need to speak for 45 seconds. So if you're not used to speaking and getting no response, maybe the IELTS is better suited for you. But in the IELTS you really get like a conversation with a person, and that's how they score you. I scored much better on the TOEFL test than on the IELTS, so the difference was quite big. So apparently for me the TOEFL was better. So for the IELTS test, I had an overall average of 7.5, which is okay for most schools, I think. And the different subsections, I didn't go below 7.0. For the TOEFL test, I scored the internet-based test. I scored 140 out of 120. So most universities in the US, like Stanford, for example, only require a level of 100. So I'm quite safe there with my scores. For IELTS, for some programs, I was not suited with only my 7.0 for some subsections. So that's why my TOEFL scores are better. The application process is not that easy. You have to look, especially because I mentioned it in the beginning, you don't get a lot of information from your university, so you have to look everything up. You have to find the programs, what you need to do, what the requirements are. So I all had to do it by myself, so it took me about 2 or 3 months to figure everything out, what I needed. But once you're in the application, it goes quite quick. They have like a structured, well, I'm speaking for Stanford now, a structured website where you have to do 15 steps. You start with step 1, step 2. When you feel like stopping or finding something else, you can stop at step 3 and start later on again with step 3, and that's it. So you can do it in several times. The most difficult thing is to find something that differentiates you from the rest. So in the US, compared to the UK, it's really important that your complete application makes sense. So your CV, your letters of recommendation, your scores, they just have to make one fluent line. Because when I'm talking for me, during my studies, I've been very focused on sports. I've been abroad for 120 days a year, so I'm really sports focused. So I should mention that in my CV. Also for my letter of recommendation, I found someone who got a medal in the Olympics. So my complete application makes one fluent, coherent story. So I think that's really important, that you have a coherent story. So in your CV, your statements, your letter of recommendation, you should try to make one coherent story. I come from a university that has a really academic focus. So I was hoping to get some more experience, like in company projects, like network, like meet new people, instead of being at home writing a paper all day. That's what we have to do now. We have to write a thesis, write some papers, study these thick books. Then you get an exam, you write everything down, and then 2 months later you forget it. So I am hoping that when going to the US, I get to do some in-company projects, work together with companies instead of just writing papers and studying thick books. I want to know the practical side of what I've studied for the past 5 years. Als jullie willen appliceren voor een programma in Amerika, laat jullie vooral niet overlopen door al de vereisten dat ze vragen. Het is eigenlijk vrij gemakkelijk om daar allemaal aan te voldoen. Begin er op tijd aan, neem vooral jullie tijd en bekijk alles stap voor stap. En vooral als je vragen hebt, ga naar mensen dat er al geweest zijn of spreek met professoren van de universiteit. Vaak zijn er professoren die zelf in Amerika gestudeerd hebben en die kun je dan echt goed helpen bij je applicatie. Dus dat kan echt handig zijn. Of ga naar een bibliotheek en zoek het op. Ook de websites van de meeste universiteiten zijn redelijk representatief. Dus daar vind je ook heel veel informatie op. Maar laat je vooral niet afschrikken door alle dingen dat ze vragen. Ook als je punten bijvoorbeeld iets minder goed zijn, of je GMAT-scores vallen een beetje tegen, of je GRE-scores vallen een beetje tegen. Laat je daar niet door tegenhouden. Appliqueer en zorg ervoor dat je een sterke applicatie hebt in andere punten. Zorg dat, zoals ik al gezegd heb, dat je 1 verhaal hebt. En dat is heel belangrijk. Daar kijken ze veel meer naar dan is hij de eerste van zijn klas. Want je kunt mensen hebben die zich enkel bezighouden met hun studies. Of mensen die naast hun studies nog 5 andere dingen doen. En uiteraard hebben diegenen die 5 andere dingen doen, hebben veel minder, meestal minder goede scores, omdat ze bezig zijn met andere dingen. En dat vinden ze in de US heel belangrijk.